Rabbi Joseph, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Um, we are here today to talk about a recent article that you sent me for a conversation. The headline is Why the Most Educated People in America Fall for Anti Semitic Lies. And then the subheader is At Harvard and Elsewhere, an old falsehood is capturing new minds. This is by Dara Horn from last week. Do you want to give us a quick summary of the article and before you discuss it?
First, let me contextualize Dara Horn, who's an exceptional writer, novelist, essayist, who has acquired an exceptional forte of journalism. Her book, People Love Dead Jews, is an important anthology of essays written about anti Semitism, about the problematic of what it means for Jews who have invested time, resources, emotional commitment in educating with the hope of changing hatred. That was the unstated agreement after Auschwitz. How did this happen? Lots and lots of arguments about that. But we are going to commit ourselves to the liberal values of education. We will change minds. We have come of late since, let's say, 2016. The first experience of realizing this is before Tree of Life Synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
When in Charlottesville, they marched and said, "You will not replace us."
Yeah.
And they attacked people. And then the then president of the United States said, "There are good people on both sides." No, no, no. There are some things for which there can't be good people on both sides. And from that moment on, synagogue shootings, murders, and now, of course, after October 7th, Dara Horn is attempting to understand how is it possible that Harvard, Columbia, MIT, Penn State, the University of California at Berkeley, UCLA, every threshold of what we assume to be the agents of liberal democratic values have instead inverted into the agents of hatred against Jews. So her essay, very much drawn from the insights of People Love Dead Jews. She is a Harvard alum, a PhD in Hebrew and Yiddish language. And she was invited as a Harvard alum to sit on a task force dealing with anti-Semitism before then President Gay gave testimony to the U.S. House of Representatives and ultimately was forced out. It's a significant 23-page, at least in my PDF form, essay. I recommend it. I think it's worth not simply reading, but studying. I don't want to trivialize its depth by attempting to frame it. She coined an idiom that I thought particularly important 2/3 of the way through in quoting someone she meets in Minnesota. She refers to a verbal swastika.
Huh.
And I want to use that as a way of understanding what Jews on campus have experienced in the aftermath of October 7th. So let me be clear, as I have been in our conversations since we began. The criticism of the state of Israel, criticism of its policies, its procedures with regard to Palestinians, criticisms with regard to the decisions it's made militarily since the war which was initiated by Hamas. None of that is inherently anti-Semitic. It certainly is not offensive to me. I participate as a Jew in the criticism against the state of Israel. When, however, please go ahead, Jason.
That she has a paragraph specific to this point.
Let's use it.
Yes. So she says, criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitic. Jews are now required to recite this humiliatingly obvious sentence over and over as the price of admission to public discourse about their own demonization. In debates, that she has in scare quotes, in debates with people who are often unable to name the relevant river or sea, the many legitimate concerns about Israel's policies towards Palestinians, and the many legitimate concerns about Israel's current war in Gaza cannot explain these eliminationist chants and slogans, the glee with which they are delivered, the lawlessness that has accompanied them, or the open assault on Jews. The timing alone laid the game bare. This mass exhilaration first emerged not in response to Israel's war to take down Hamas and rescue its kidnapped citizens, but exactly in response to and explicitly in support of the most lethal and sadistic barbarity against Jews since the Holocaust.
So, how somehow can Jews, in the 4 months since October 7th, and this article has been passed around all the Jews I know, everywhere in the world, we are still trying to make sense of.
And do you know all the Jews in the world?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I do know they meet every Thursday afternoon in a particular phone booth. I would use that line often about all Jews know each other and we're a confab. To admit that our investment of the past not yet 80 years in educating to change people's hatred of us, to admit now it was a bad investment. I have an entire rabbinic academic career anchored in dialogue, interfaith relations, specifically about issues of the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. So it's done. It's clear there was no dent made in this blind, conspiratorial hatred. What terrifies me is linking her framing analysis to the current mood in the United States of America in just one place. How do you explain half the electorate committed to someone who continues to cross any imaginable law? He could not sell hot dogs in Central Park. He is barred. But you're going to give him the nuclear codes. It's not possible this is happening. All in the twisted conspiratorial notion, they're after me, I'm protecting you because they'll be after you.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I was thinking this simply by myself. But there are tens of millions of people that seem to agree he could, should, might be president again. So the big lie, Himmler's ability to create propagandistic reality. Dara Horn's correct. We're in a toxic dump site in which what we say to each other has to be checked on an hourly basis. I don't know how to guarantee that you understand what I just said.
Yeah.
So I'm a Jew, and I don't agree with the wholesale bombing of Palestinians. Not enough. From the river to the sea. Well, where will I go? We don't care. Not dissimilar from, yes, I'm white, I'm privileged, you're a racist. No, that it doesn't go together.
So Dara writes towards the beginning of this article. So she's mentioning how she was tasked to serve on the Anti-Semitism Advisory Committee at Harvard, convened after October 7th. And she says, I was asked to participate because I'm a Harvard alumna who wrote a book about anti-Semitism. As soon as my participation became public, I was inundated with messages from Jewish students seeking help. They approached me with their stories after having already tried many other avenues, bewildered not only by what they'd experienced, but also by how many people dismissed or denied those experiences.
I have said to you several times, I'm not surprised nor shocked by what people have said to me since October 7th. I am profoundly demoralized by how many people have said nothing to me since October 7th.
And in the context of Donald Trump that you were alluding to, I mean, so I've been listening to the book on tyranny while I cook and whatnot. And one of the lessons, so it's 20 lessons about authoritarianism. And one of the lessons that struck me was that in authoritarian moments, the lesson is to not let go of professional standards in whatever vocation, and I and I don't want to make sloppy analogies to the past, but we do see people acting in a not professional way in the name of a lie or a cause on both ends of the spectrum, I think.
So this week, Alabama's Supreme Court has decided that frozen embryos are living children.
Mm-hmm.
I understand you don't want abortion, but you've changed language and meaning. And you've done it within the construct of legal precedents. Could we have discussed the ramifications of that? And that is, they're piling up too quickly. How much discourse and meaning is being taken away so we can talk to each other?
Well, and that's I was thinking about this. This is that. So non-Jews always want to look back to the Holocaust and talk and think of the guard at the concentration camp, or but seldom do people reflect on how the Nazi regime would not have been possible if so many lawyers didn't go along with it.
lawyers. I mean, there was duplicity and complicity at so many different layers. Okay. On the railroad tracks, there were people who moved the tracks, switched the lines. No, you can't simply be a bystander, an onlooker. What Dara Horn's essay suggests is, yes, there is a group of people who hate Jews. That's not new. That's not different. But the place and mechanism of that hatred has now shifted. These are not Ku Klux Klan people marching down main streets of small rural towns. Hence, this morning, a meeting of presidents of great universities, and they're all talking about, quote, the downfall of Harvard. Is it just the elite? No, I was a professor at a state university in Minnesota. And everything in Dara Horn's essay, I can give you jot and tittle of my experience there. We so needed the universities of America that had been the mechanisms through which millions of immigrants of every stripe had come and become Americans. They learned English. They became literate. They became productive. Surely the university would be a place that would say, no, this is too far. No. The issue is not free speech. The issue is an environment conducive to living together.
Talk a little bit about, so she cites David Nirenberg's book, Anti-Judaism.
Yes, it's a very, very important book. Very dense and scholarly, she is correct. Anti-Judaism was an idiom prior to David's book that most of us used with regard to the textual polemic initiated in Christian scripture, in the second scripture, in that part of Gospels which we consider to be anti-Jewish. The interpretation of how Jews behaved in the Passion, the idiom Pharisees, which is translated today in dictionaries as hypocrite.
Yeah.
Okay. The Christian text polemicizes Jews as a textual decision. Jews who did not and will not accept Jesus as the Savior, as the Christ. Let's make sure our text permanently marginalizes them. That was anti-Judaism, an idiom that Rosemary Ruther in the mid-70s created as a mechanism of saying this textual hatred was used to be the bulwark culturally of what became anti-Semitism. So there was a distinction made. Nirenberg builds upon that to talk about an anti-Judaism that comes from within the Western culture, deeply embedded in the culture, religion, social. How do you explain in any way that Jews poisoned all the wells of Europe as a means of promulgating the bubonic plague?
Yeah.
I mean, you read it and you understand there were trials and this became part of pamphlets. No one believes this. It's not possible. The blood libel, which says that at this time of year, Jews kidnap Christian children, fatten them up, kill them in order to use their blood in the making of matzah, unleavened bread for Passover. How many different fairy tales is that a part of?
Yeah.
People believed it. Well into the late 20th century, there are cases of the blood libel. So Nuremberg takes the myths, the legends, looks at the source of this hatred to somehow make sense of how do you uproot this? You know, not an easy let's get on TV and have some public service announcements.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, politicians like to talk about the Judeo-Christian foundation to the United States. And Nuremberg's argument is anti-Judaism is actually the foundation of Western culture. And Darahorn has a sentence here. If piety was a given society's ideal, Jews were impious blasphemers. If secularism was the idea, Jews were backward pietists. If capitalism was evil, Jews were capitalists. If communism was evil, Jews were communists. If nationalism was glorified, Jews were rootless cosmopolitans. If nationalism was vilified, Jews were chauvinistic nationalists. Anti-Judaism thus becomes a righteous fight to promote justice. This dynamic forces Jews into the defensive mode of constantly proving they are not evil, and even simply that they have a right to exist.
That's it. And I won't say yes or no to Dara's exceptionally well-written analysis of Nuremberg, because I don't think David can be developed that quickly into her. Point finally is, what is it you want me to explain about my existence and my survival? Why do I need to ask if the unique survival of the Jewish people and Jewish life is a value you share? Well, why do I begin a new relationship in dialogue with asking, do we share that value? The unique survival of Jewish life. Why isn't that now in the 21st century assumable? Why do I have to apologize and explain, yes, I am a Zionist, but I don't hate Palestinians. I am white, and yes, privileged in some contexts, but I don't bring racism into the conversation simply with my presence. So some of us are beginning to ask, and I think Dara's rereading of Nuremberg is helpful here. Is this a zeitgeist? Is there a Teutonic shift going on over which we have no preparation? And we have to wait patiently, as we always have. I remember my mother, who warned me during the Rosenberg trial. I was 10 years old, 11 years old. Be careful. Look what they're doing to the Jews. I had no idea if my mother agreed or disagreed with the construct of espionage, whether they had committed the espionage, At 11, I didn't know that all the main players in this were Jews. But imagine 10 years after the end of World War II, and America is executing 2 Jews for giving away the atomic secrets. You are required to have a safe room if you have a home or apartment in Israel. That means you're not safe. Do Jews need to sit and think about that formula? Undergirding of Darrell Horn's question, how is it that the most educated people in America are buying this lie?
Yeah. So about the zeitgeist, she writes, one confounding fact in this onslaught of the world's oldest hatred is that American society should have been ready to handle it. Many public and private institutions have invested enormously in recent years in attempts to defang bigotry. Ours is an era in which even sneaker companies feel obliged to publicly denounce hate. But diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives have proved to be no match for anti-Semitism, for a clear reason: the durable idea of anti-Semitism as justice. DEI efforts are designed to combat the effects of social prejudice by insisting on equity. Some people in our society have too much power and too much privilege and are overrepresented, so justice requires leveling the playing field. But anti-Semitism isn't primarily a social prejudice. It is a conspiracy theory. The big lie that Jews are supervillains manipulating others. The righteous fight for justice, therefore, does not require protecting Jews as a vulnerable minority. Instead, it requires taking Jews down.
I don't want to be caught up in the extra divisive experience that has divided the Jewish community in the post-George Floyd issues around anti-racism. I experienced at the university and believe what Darrell Horn wrote. I watched it. But to create deeper divisions has its own threshold of risk. To speak truth to ideological power may go nowhere right now. A huge group of important Black clergy are pushing against Biden for his support of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
These issues have no simple lines anymore. And I'm one of those people who think that the complexity and ambiguity of the times in which we're living require that we stop, reflect, refocus our conversations. Should the kibbutzim near Gaza, that are the horrific site of massacre, kidnapping, rape, should they be plowed under or now maintained as a memorial of evil? This is a serious question that is now being debated.
Mm-hmm.
What do we...
I mean, I don't want to dwell on the grisly details, but it's still astonishing to me that they're not in the news every day.
The current Israeli government, most people are now assuming, has made a decision. The war is more important than the hostages. Is that based on intel about how many hostages they now perceive to be already dead? I can't imagine the emotional burden of living in Israel today. So American Jews, yes, there's a significant peace group within the Jewish community that has risked being banished from the institutional Jewish community. And there are Jews along everywhere the political spectrum. But you read Dara Horn's essay, you find yourself all of a sudden unified by the reality of this hatred. It won't finally matter when the war ends. This will quickly pass. Israel will participate in a group of nations that rebuilds Gaza. Under whose power? And what happened on October 7th? Is that my memory or our memory? How do you integrate the massacre of the originals, the native peoples of North America, when you go to a military memorial, Bighorn? Who are you memorializing? So Dara Horn is asking a set of questions for which she does not offer answers.
Yeah.
That's why I find her as a thinker and a writer so important. Yes, we have to reconstitute relationships. We have to begin to remember why we want relationships. The nature of transactional relationships between Jews and Christians, that's now going to be a very big topic.
So she, in the part of the article, she talks about the hashtag Free Palestine in the context of a verbal swastika, along with other verbal abuse and chalking and graffiti the Jews have experienced. And she writes, "The only purpose of the chalking and swatting and taunting and assaulting and silencing is to dehumanize and demonize Jews. Every time Jews are forced to prove that they didn't deserve this or to hide who they are, it is already working."
You know why the Nazis made everyone take off all their clothes? Because when you make a group of people become nude, you shame them, pacify them, humiliate them, especially if these are very religious, pious people.
Mm-hmm.
Then you shave all their hair. You have taken away that element of their identity. And then you consciously and intentionally tattoo a number on them, knowing that tattoos are forbidden by biblical law. All this intentionally done to create the psychological experience of humiliation, terror, and passivity. Of course, Jewish students are afraid. Why wouldn't they be afraid? A Jewish student sent to a big university and they walk down a campus road and hear death to Israel. These are 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Maybe some have visited Israel. Maybe some have family in Israel. They came to the university to grow and develop in their ideas and ability to articulate those ideas. The stupidity of crowd contagion is not critical thought. Why wouldn't anyone be afraid? If a group of racists, Ku Klux Klan's members, carrying nooses, had a rally on campus, I don't understand. That analogy couldn't possibly be more obvious. Would the Ku Klux Klan have the freedom of speech to taunt and terrorize people of color? No. So, in a divisive, toxic political environment in which the extremes determine the discourse, asking the simple, reasonable question, how do I live in an environment which clearly does not want me to be there? And the answer is get used to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, is this a pivot point? Did we need to come this far in order ultimately now to say, okay, too much. Let's back it up. No, there are some things you can't unsee. I don't think Dara Horn understood, which is why the end of the essay is so poignant, how much the place, which was essential to her intellectual development, to her personal development, how could that place no longer exist?
Yeah, so she writes, I watched the video of students marching and screaming in front of Langdell. So she's talking about protests saying "Long live the Intifada" and from the river to the sea. I watched the video. In an instant, I remembered everything. Studying in campus libraries for my Hebrew and Yiddish literature courses, talking for hours with Muslim and Christian and progressive and conservative classmates, inviting friends of all backgrounds to join me at Hillel, scrupulously following the Jewish tradition of argument for the sake of heaven, and even the most heated debates, gathering for Shabbat dinners crowded with hundreds of students, and over those long and beautiful dinners falling in love. My classmates and I often disagreed about the most important things, but no one screamed in our faces when we wore Hebrew t-shirts on campus. No one shunned us when we talked about our friends and family in Israel or spat on us on our way to class. No crowds gathered to chant for our deaths. No one told us that there should be no more Jews. That night, my future husband and I worried only about getting in trouble for sneaking up to the library roof. And earlier in the article, she mentions the decline in attendance at Harvard of Jewish students. Is that because Jews are opting out, or because they've been opted out?
I have no information that in any way Harvard is not admitting Jews. I think Jews have long looked at universities and wondered, are they safe?
Mm-hmm.
Or are there a critical number of Jews where I can have a Jewish life? I did that with my 4 children as they made choices. That's a reasonable question. Why are parents with high school students now worried about where they will spend money they don't have, take on loans that they will be repaying with their adult children, to determine where their children will get a university education that will provide them professional credentials? And now add, they will know it's safe to be Jewish. Jason, we were not supposed to be having this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, my oldest son goes to William and Mary here in Virginia, and he opted out of a club that he was in because of a letter they put out after October 7th that made him uncomfortable. And it was, I mean, he did that without consulting me or my wife. And so it was blatant enough that it bothered him, who I don't know that he's been super reflective about these things.
So what, in the midst of everything else, we are going to talk about, I can't send my child to Harvard. If I told you this on October 5th, no, that there are some things that are simply not corruptible.
And to be, I've alluded to this in our previous conversations, but I mean, not to beat up on Harvard. I don't know that you and I having this conversation within, the United Methodist Church would be received any better. So it's
okay.
It's not, it's institutions. It's not just universities.
No, but it's now deep enough, and the toxic level of hatred now experienced at levels where not a lot of denial is possible.
Mm-hmm.
So if the university as a institution, which is the bedrock of, okay, that doesn't work anymore, the professional institutions that bind and engage faculty and research, what? That's not going to work anymore? We're talking about the stuff that holds together the innards of the body, the muscles, the sinew. We're parts. How do the parts work together? Okay, we better stop long enough to talk about what's happening. Because it's not just Dara Horn's analysis of the Harvard I attended is no longer the Harvard I can serve on a committee on anti-Semitism. That's not what this essay is about. It's about an issue that is more than 2,000 years old, which has reached a critical level of toxicity, infection. So, for all of the institutions that are caught up in the tragic, divisive extremes, the Jasons and Josephs are waving our hands, running around saying, could we all stop and talk about what we're talking about, how we're talking about it?
Well, this article, it occurred to me that from, in the context of the Hebrew Bible, the opposite of love is not hate. It's apathy.
Indifference. Yes.
That love,
Elie
hate.
Wiesel said that all the time.
Oh, really? I just thought I came up with it on my own. Okay. Love hates what is hateful. That's God's wrath.
We're entering the process of moving toward questions of salvation, redemption. What does that mean right now? Homelessness at a level that is mind-boggling. It's simply no. Wars where people's essential fear of no longer being free. Okay. And we're not able to find a common vocabulary to try to explain to people who express hate. No, you don't have the right to hurt someone with a verbal swastika. And those who claim that free speech is more important, then I want Ku Klux Klan members to be given permission to march down universities and have rallies with nooses and burning crosses. I want to see that on the same universities that provide these kinds of Palestinian rallies. This is not discussion, it's not debate, certainly not dialogue, it's diatribe and disinformation.
And there are more. So in her article, she mentioned, so there's more subtle ways of institutionalizing this anti-Judaism. And so she mentions a course at Harvard at the School of Public Health called The Settler Colonial Determinants of Health, which looked at case studies from South Africa, the United States, and Israel. Its premise, not a topic of discussion, but the premise on which the entire course was built, was that Israel is a settler colonialist state. A Jewish student who wrote the professor questioning what they saw as the ideological slant of the readings was told that it was insulting to suggest that the course had an agenda.
Correct. And this is certainly part of the nomenclature of the university I serve. Mm-hmm. So, how do we talk to each other about learning? What does that mean anymore? I understand people have various elements of research that are highly specialized. Does that research act as an honest tool of learning that helps critical reasoning? These are undergraduates. They're not graduate students seeking more and more highly specialized areas of thought. I hope Dara Horn's essay is promulgated as widely as possible because it asks questions about, excuse me, did you know this was going on? And now that you do know, because everyone is entitled to be ignorant, simply lack the knowledge. Now that you do know, now what's your position?
Yeah, and she, the thing to know is this comes up in the essay quite a bit, but she writes towards the end, there was a time not so very long ago when we didn't have to prove our right to exist. Mm-hmm. And it seems that at bottom, that's if there's something to work towards, it's a return to that.
Yes. We are different. But in that difference is our resilience, our destiny.
Yeah. It's yeah, I just keep thinking that, these are serious times for what appear to be unserious people. All of us.
The two of us.
But collectively, we seem to be a decadent people.
I lack the vocabulary to describe what I experience on any given day. I don't know that decadence, that unseriousness. I can't describe what the Alabama Supreme Court and a former president selling golden tennis shoes. How do you put those pieces in
while also being unapologetically pro-Putin?
And now owing the New York more than $400 million for his legally determined fraud against the system. Okay, he can't do business in New York for 3 years because he shows no remorse, no contrition. And you're going to nominate him to do what?
Yeah, and I think, Dara Horn's piece, it's all, so Steve Bannon was right? That if you just flood the zone with shit, people can't make sense of the news and what's going on and I think
it's Himmler's handbook.
Yeah, I think we're all living through that.
Yep.
Well, Rabbi Joseph, at the very least, thank you for being a light in my dark world.
And it gets reflected back in the presence you permit me and the depth of the relationship we're creating. Thank you.
Yeah. So I will see you on Monday night.
Monday night, we're discussing Abraham and Rachel. Okay.